Now then, our first guest is going to tell us her true story about her encounters with some of the darkest criminal minds in history. Delighted to welcome to the show, Jannah Monroe.
Hi. Hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. It's great to be with you. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. So your book is called Hearts of Darkness, Serial Killers, the Behavioral Science Unit, and My Life as a Woman in the FBI. And there's loads I want to ask you, including who you've met, who you dealt with. But I want to go back to the beginning to start with. How did you get into the FBI? Was it sort of in your family?
No, oddly enough, it wasn't in my family. And if you want to call it a role model, I'm going to call it TV. So I was an only child and nobody in my family was in law enforcement. But I liked the notion of having laws and liberties and having people having rights. And I couldn't stand bullies. I hated people who picked on the vulnerable, picked on other people. So I thought those are two things I'm passionate about. And it was kind of a calling. And it seemed like law enforcement served that calling. So I watched movies and TV, and although they're not very realistic, I knew that there was a thing called law enforcement, and I really felt strongly that I could do that.
Yes, I often wondered if some of the things that we watch are quite unrealistic, or if they are, do the people, the producers in the TV studios, do they sort of do their research right, or do they just make it dramatic?
Well, you know what? I think it's a combination because it's even when they call it reality-based entertainment. I mean, let's face it, there are going to be days when you're doing admin, right? So nobody wants to see you sitting at the computer for 8 hours. So they kind of condense those sorts of things. But I think more recently, some of the shows are more realistic. They make an effort to do that research. I mean, research is easier to conduct now. So I have to give them credit or trying to make it more accurate. So not only is it like reality-based entertainment, it's actually educational in some areas.
Okay. And what about the training? I would imagine that was quite grueling.
Yes, the first training I had was actually in a police academy. So that was more grueling because it was my first time and I was a lot younger. When I went through the FBI academy, I was 30. And so it was my second academy, but it was a bit different with different emphasis and focus. So it was almost 6 months, and it was your physical, your education. You had firearms training and practicals where you would have scenarios that are reality based, and you'd react to them and then be judged. So yeah, it was I'd call it intense.
Yes. Well, you were the first and at the time the only female agent in the FBI's Behavioral Sciences Unit at Quantico, and later became the first assistant director of the FBI Cyber Division. I would imagine, I'm not sure how long ago we're talking, but you were very much in a male-dominated world. Would that be true?
That would be very true. Yes.
and did that make it tougher?
It did. And you have to put yourself back in that time frame. However, I don't think things have changed to today, but by my perspective, it's certainly not an equal playing field in a lot of these male dominated industries. So yeah, there wasn't really a welcome wagon. And I think the way I looked at it and the way I did become successful was proving that I could do the job and attempting to earn respect from my colleagues.
Quite right. It shouldn't matter whether you're male, female, tall, short, or anything, as long as you're doing the job well, does it?
Right. I mean, it shouldn't matter. You're right. But we're people. And a lot of times there are conscious and unconscious biases. And I do believe I had to work harder at things because I used to laugh and say, well, they give me credit just because I can walk and chew gum. The standards were pretty low if you were a female. If you were a woman, it's like, oh, wow, look, she could actually make that arrest, where they wouldn't say something like that to a male counterpart.
Crazy. Now, over the course of your career, you consulted on more than 850 homicide cases. That's a lot, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it is. And the only way that I was able to do that is from the behavioral science unit. The way that is set up, it's kind of like a think tank approach. So my 11 counterparts, there were 12 of us at the time, we all had different cases. And when the law enforcement officers would come to see us, either looking for offender traits and characteristics, like what's the profile of this, who would have done this, or link analysis, meaning let's just say there's 3 homicides, and do we think by looking at the crime scenes, was it the same offender? So when they would come down to, and I say down because we were located 2 floors below the regular floor, in a basement is where our offices were. But when they would come down to see us, we would get in a group of either like 3 to 5 people. So I worked on not only my own cases, but everybody else's. So I had the opportunity sometimes to look at even 3 a day. So that's how it accumulated to like 850 cases.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot though, even 3 a day, because like you say, it's a very intense job.
Yes, it is. I called it totally immersed in it because that became my world. It's a pretty dark world, but that's what I looked at every day. And I'm talking in photos and crime scene reenactments, those sorts of things that did not go to the crime scenes that often because we weren't the first responders.
Now, I know you've crossed paths with a lot of infamous people. 2 that sprang to mind straight away, Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yes, and Ted Bundy, who's probably one of the most prolific serial killers that we've encountered. And I say that because he confessed to, or we could attribute to him, about 30 homicides, but we speculate that he did as close to maybe 100. Although he did not want to speak to me, he spoke to my partner. And the FBI typically, when you're doing those kinds of interviews, especially in prison, you have 2 of you to make sure your observations are correct. One takes the lead in the interview, the other one takes notes. At this particular case, Bundy only wanted to speak with my partner, Bill Hagmeyer. He made it clear to me he didn't want to speak with a female. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that, I don't know. I don't think he had a conscience at all. He was very much a sociopath, but I don't believe he was comfortable admitting some of the things that he had done, all women victims, of course, with a female sitting across from him.
And what about Jeffrey Dahmer? Was that a similar story?
Well, with Jeffrey Dahmer, what it was is the Wisconsin police, when they made the arrest and they found body parts in his refrigerator, and they found body parts in other areas of the house, they had not encountered something like this before. So they came to the behavioral science to debrief us on everything that they found, what Dahmer was saying. And it was our job to let them know, yes, they weren't dealing with a run-of-the-mill serial killer. So what we did was devise the interview questions for them, what to ask him. But I didn't actually get to speak to Dahmer because he was killed 2 days before my interview was scheduled with him in the prison. He was already incarcerated. And what we refer to kind of mockingly, I guess, is prison justice. So he was killed in prison by some of the inmates. Right.
I would imagine, even if you're not always face to face with these people, I mean, you have to look through grueling photographs, like you just mentioned, body parts. I don't know how you manage to switch off when you go home. I think I'd have nightmares.
Well, I like to look at it as it was kind of like a clinical detachment, like a doctor might do. I'm certainly not making myself analogous to a doctor, but they have to detach, or they would, they're giving patients bad news all the time. They get emotionally too involved. So I would do that. And by referring to the cases as case numbers, I rarely used a name. I did not want to personalize it because just of what you say, it's not even a regular death scene, which for most people is not exactly heartwarming or something that makes you feel good inside. But these are grueling, grisly photos with, decapitation, evisceration, things that you're not accustomed to seeing. So I would focus on whatever it was I was being asked to do. Like, was it who did this, or looking at all of the post-mortem activities? So a lot of the activity that had gone on was after death. That tells quite a story about what type of person might have done that. So I focused on the work and tried not to recognize that I was looking at a fellow human being.
Yes, I can understand that. And is it a bit like sort of putting a jigsaw together? Is it, you are finding different pieces of the case and trying to get an answer?
Oh, you know what? That's a great analogy, a jigsaw. Yes, because every little detail matters. And if you've watched some of the true crime shows, it's very true in that you'll be looking at something, and if the case is going cold, meaning you don't have any more leads, you go back over and you look at the evidence. And what's always a great idea is to have another set of eyes look at the evidence too, because it's sometimes the smallest little things, and there's still the puzzle isn't quite put together. So yeah, you can't overlook anything. It might seem insignificant at the time, and later you find out it's that missing little piece at the end.
Yeah. So let's talk about Silence of the Lambs, because I believe Clarice Starling, who Jodie Foster played, was modelled on you and your character.
Yes, like you mentioned previously, I was the only female in the behavioral science unit, and Thomas Harris had wanted to have a female protagonist. And so they used, my character for that. And then the filming crew came to Quantico to film a lot of the scenes there. Thomas Harris wanted to highlight Quantico and what the FBI Academy looked like. So my job was to work with Jodie Foster as she played Clarice. And I was very impressed with her professionalism and her ability, but she would ask me, the script says, I'm supposed to say this. Would you say it like this? Would you say it differently? So we'd talk about that. And I'd say, no, I wouldn't use that word. I'd never use that word. Or no, I wouldn't dress like that if I were going into a prison. So she had influence that I didn't to maybe make a few edits or changes in the script.
Great. What was she like? Was she nice?
Very, very nice. And like I said, what I appreciated is she knew her material before she was there. She knew what kind of questions she wanted to ask. So she was very professional about her work and very amicable in her personality.
Yeah, yeah. Are you still doing it, Jannah, or are you retired now?
Well, I've retired from that. And then, as you mentioned, I went on to other assignments within the FBI. And I worked as the first, we called it an assistant director of the cyber division. And that was starting the cyber division for the FBI. And when I retired from the FBI, I worked in corporate in 3 different careers, if you will.
Mm. I think you must be an amazingly strong human being. There must have been some psychological tolls taken on you of doing the job.
Yes, there were. And I can give you a little story about that if you'd like.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and sometimes it's things, even though we might think we're sufficiently introspective and we know ourselves, there's going to be things we don't know. And mine was that I started taking things and, equating them to myself and wasn't even aware of it. And my husband had to point that out. But I had worked several cases in a row where the female victims had been stabbed to death, excessively stabbed, but it was with their own knives in their own home. We referred to that as weapons of opportunity, meaning the offender broke in, didn't bring his own weapon and used like steak knives or things that you'd have on the counter in a butcher block. So I was alone for quite a while. Dale, my husband, who was also an agent, was gone on a case for a couple of months. And looking at these cases at work, I started thinking, well, I'm home alone and our knives are out here. So I thought, aha, if somebody breaks in, they're going to have to bring their own knife, bring their own weapon. So I took all of our knives and put them in the dryer, which was in our basement. And I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. So fast forward, I go on a trip. He comes home. He's trying to, such a gourmet chef, he's trying to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but he's looking for a knife. And so he calls me and said, where are our knives? And I said, oh, they're in the dryer. So if someone breaks in, they have to bring their own knife. He paused and he said, you know what, when you get home, we need to have a talk.
Well, I don't blame you, to be honest. I mean, I think I'd be sleeping with a gun under my bed or something.
Oh, I had that too. That's right. And so
don't blame
you might think that's abnormal. I had 2 pillows, right? One where my husband would have slept and one with mine. So I had a gun under each pillow, thinking that, if somebody attacks me, then I would have a gun under this pillow. He wouldn't think to look under the other pillow. So yeah, a lot of those things did creep into my psyche.
Yeah, you got all bases covered there.
That's right.
So in the book, Hearts of Darkness, is it your memoir? Is it your autobiography? Or is it sort of each case one by one?
It's actually a combination. It's my memoir. I touch on certain things in my life, but it focuses on my time in the behavioral science unit. But I thought it was important to mention other things because one of my motivations for writing the book is like a platform for speaking to, I'll say young women, but it's young women and men with the intent of trying to maybe inspire might be too lofty of a word, but trying to encourage them to go to the next level of whatever it is they want to do, what they're pursuing, and to show somebody from a meager start, but who had a lot of tenacity. And I did not take no for an answer in the areas of things that I knew I could do, right? I'd like to encourage others to do that.
And no regrets?
No regrets. And part of that is, or most of that is, I'm a person that doesn't have regrets, in that I think looking back at things, it's dangerous because we all make decisions and do things in the moment with the best information we have at the time. It's so much easier when you look back and go, oh, I should have done this, or I could have done that. It was a different time frame and you had different toolkits available to you. So no, I feel very rewarded that I was able to experience as many things as I did.
Great. Well, it certainly sounds like an interesting read to me. It's right up my street. The book's called Hearts of Darkness, Serial Killers, the Behavioral Science Unit, and My Life as a Woman in the FBI. It's by Jannah Monroe, who is speaking to now, and we are selling it right now on our website. Jannah, if people want to find out a little more about you, are you on any sort of social media?
Actually, my girlfriends that have been working with me on my book tour, they have it on their websites. But I have if you look me up, just Jannah Monroe, it'll go to my brand new website. And I'm just now starting on those things. So
wonderful. We'll watch this space. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jannah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.